Alright guys, welcome back to another video on the banking system that we are developing using the C programming language. In the previous video, we have developed the basic structure of this program. In this video, we will implement the view balance and deposit funds section. So what we do right now is we will implement the view balance. So what I will do is I will create a function which will display the balance that we have in our account. Now, in order to create that function, what I will do is I will go before this main function and I will define that function. So here, this function will not return any value. So the data type will be void, and then I will name the function as view balance. Now this function here, it will take a value and it will display that. In this case, it will be the balance of the user. So here I will say double balance, and in this function, we just want to display the value that we get for this balance variable. So I will say something like this: your current balance is, and we will display this value. Now here for the currency, I have used the dollar symbol. If you want, you guys can use any other currency symbol here. Okay, so straightforward function, it will just display the value it gets for this balance variable. Now what we have to do is we have to call this function whenever the user enters the choice of 1. So here in this case 1, I will call this function. So it will be view balance, and we have to pass in a value, and that value will be the balance variable which contains the user's balance. Now this was a very simple function that we were able to implement. Now the next functionality that we have to implement here is for depositing the funds. So what we want to do is we want to create a function which will ask the user to enter the amount that he wants to deposit. It will read that value and then it will add to the user's balance. So again, before this main function, we will define that deposit funds function. Again, this function here, it will not return any value. I will call this function as deposit funds. And now how we can implement this function. Now what we want to do is when we call this deposit funds function, it has to read the value that the user wants to deposit, and then it has to check whether the user has entered a proper value, and then it has to add that value that the user entered to the balance. The user's account balance is defined inside this main function. So what we do is we will use the pointers. This main function will provide the address of the balance variable to this deposit funds function, and because of that, the deposit funds function will be able to modify that value. So here we will write double, and then we will use the pointer, and then we will have the balance. So now what happens here is the deposit funds function will get the memory address of this balance variable so that it can modify that value. If we look at this view balance, then for the view balance function, we are not using the pointers. The reason for that is here we just have to display whatever the value that we get for the balance. We are not going to modify the balance variable which is defined inside the main function. But the deposit funds function has to modify the balance variable which is defined inside the main function, and that's why we're using the pointer here. Now how we can implement this deposit funds function. So the first thing that we do is we will define a variable. Let us say deposit. So it will be double deposit. So what we do is we will ask the user to enter the amount that he wants to deposit, and we will read that and store that in this deposit variable. So here what I will do, I will use the printf function and I will ask the user to enter the amount that he wants to deposit, and then we will use the scanf function. We will read the value and we will store that in this deposit variable. I just misspelled this deposit. I will correct that. Now here, since the value that we are reading for this deposit amount is of type double, we are using the format specifier %LF. This is important. And now what we have is we have the amount that the user wants to deposit. Now what we have to do is we have to check whether the user has entered a proper value. For example, the user can enter a negative number. We can't deposit that. User can enter a value of 0. There is no point in depositing a value of 0. We have to check for that. So here we will use the if conditional statement and we will check whether the deposit value that the user has entered is greater than 0. In that case, what we want to do, we want to deposit the value. If the user is entered a value which is 0 or a value less than 0, then we have to display an appropriate message. So here in this case, I will say invalid deposit amount, please try again. So if the user is going to enter a value which is greater than 0, we will deposit that. Otherwise, we will display this particular message. Now, if the user is going to enter a value which is greater than 0, a proper amount that he wants to deposit, then what we have to do in this program? We have to update the user's balance. So first we will access the balance variable. So what happens here is we get the memory address for this pointer balance. With this star balance, we are accessing that and we want to alter that value. So here we will write plus equal to and then the deposit amount. So whatever the balance which is there in the user's account, that will be updated with the deposit amount. If the user is containing, let us say $100, and if he deposits $20, then it will update the user's balance to $120. And after that, what we'll do is we will display a message, something like this. We will say deposited this amount and your new balance is this amount. So here we are displaying the value that the user has deposited and the updated balance. Okay, now what we have done here is we have implemented this deposit funds function. What we have to do is we have to call this function when the user wants to deposit the amount. So here when the user is going to enter a choice of 2, it means he wants to deposit the funds. So we will call that function here in this case 2. So it will be deposit funds, and here this deposit funds takes the memory address of the balance variable, and that's why we have to provide the address of this balance variable. So it will be address of operator and then the variable name, which is balance. Now again, if you look at this view balance here, we are not altering the value of the balance variable in this view balance function, and that's why we are just passing the value. In this deposit funds function, we are altering the value of this balance variable, and that's why we are providing the memory address so that this deposit funds function can modify this balance variable's value. Okay, now in this video, what we have done is we have implemented the deposit funds function. In the next video, we will implement the withdraw funds function, and we will finish up this program.